Welcome to Strip Cover Lit. I'm Dalton Gentry. You may notice that Adrian Fort isn't here. That's because we decided to do a few solo projects. You may have caught his writer's quote of the week. Well, this is mine. This is going to be Pretty Words with Dalton Gentry. I'm doing this one because we seem to have noticed a lack of poetry on BookTube, and that is a crime, because poetry is a wonderful thing and it's often completely shunned away in the world of literature. So this program, we're going to be taking a classic poem, something that you could find online, free to use, free rights, and just breaking it down a little bit. So for the first video of this, I'm going to do one of my favorite poems. This is going to be Neutral Tones by Thomas Hardy, if I may. Neutral Tones. We stood by a pond that winter day, and the sun was white, as though chidden of God, and a few leaves lay on the starving sod. They had fallen from ash, and were gray. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a-wing. Since then keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face, and the God-cursed sun, and a tree, and a pond edge with grayish leaves. Now, if you follow all of our videos, I have actually read this one before in one of our poetry videos, but I think a little breakdown is necessary on this and why this is a great and a classic of poetry. Now, the contrast between love and everything's supposed to be bright and wonderful and happy, and the grayish, dead leaves, the dead look on this woman's face, that beautiful playing of imagery that Thomas Hardy really works for the author here, that's one of the best things about this poem. Now, maybe it's just my modern personality, but I'm not really huge and keen on poems that have a very strict and rigid rhyming pattern. When you're looking at classic poetry, you're going to fall into that a lot, especially moving further and further back. The rhyming pattern, however, is not as blatant and as awful as you get with some older poetry. Now, Mr. Hardy here is actually quite an accomplished poet, and a lot of his works are absolutely wonderful reads if you do get the chance. But Neutral Tones has always been a favorite of mine for sure. I think an important part of this poem is Hardy is trying to capture the growth of a relationship. Anytime that you get poetry, you think very floral language, very flowery language about love and going on about how things are great and wonderful. Hardy here is giving us a realistic look into a relationship that it could be a good relationship. I'm not saying it's a bad one, but it seems to have progressed a little bit, and there seems to be a little bit of tension between the two characters that are being mentioned here. Now, I think that's interesting because it's not the normal floral language that you get again. There's a little bit of depth to it. And maybe that's just me pulling back to having a thing for Bukowski and Vonnegut and Pollock. I like a little grit. So this seems to be something that has a little more grit than normal. Let me read this one more time for you. Neutral Tones. We stood by a pond that winter day, and the sun was white as though chidden of God, and a few leaves lay on the starving sod. They had fallen from ash and were gray. Your eyes on me were as eyes that rove over tedious riddles of years ago, and some words played between us to and fro, on which lost the more by our love. The smile on your mouth was the deadest thing, alive enough to have strength to die, and a grin of bitterness swept thereby, like an ominous bird a-wing. Since then keen lessons that love deceives and rings with wrong have shaped to me your face, and the God-cursed sun, and a tree, and a pond edge with grayish leaves. Now, if you like this segment, you have something to say about Thomas Hardy or Neutral Tones, please comment down below. Let me know what you think about this poem, and maybe suggest one of your favorite classic poems that we could tackle next episode. Make sure you follow us on Facebook at Strip Cover Lit and on Twitter at Strip Cover. I'm Dalton Gentry, and I'll see you next week.